Hi guys, Mimi G here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing another sew along for my early spring pattern 9894, and we're going to start with the skirt view B and C. Let's get started. Of course, all the suggested fabrics along with notions are always on the back of your pattern envelope. Here are the pattern pieces you'll need to cut and interface. Now, if you're new to sewing or you just need a refresher course, you can head over to sewitacademy.com where you can check out our free trial and learn the very basics. Then follow along with me here. Here are the pattern pieces you'll need to cut and interface. All right, we're going to start with pattern piece number 10. This is the side front. You should have cut 2. And we're also going to go ahead and grab our front, which was pattern piece number 9, and this was cut on the fold. We're going to go ahead and join these together. So I'm just going to grab one side front. You also have 2 single notches. Okay, so you have 2 single notches on your front and you should have 2 single notches on your side front. That's what you're going to be pinning together. So make sure you align those notches there and pin, and then continue pinning. Okay, now that we're still here, we're going to go ahead and pin the other side front to the front. Again, you know that they are matching up if you have 2 single notches and 2 single notches. Okay, so we have gone ahead and pinned both of our side fronts to the front, and we're going to go ahead and stitch these using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want you to start at the hem and you're going to work in a straight stitch, back stitching at the beginning and at the end. You are going to pin your back and your side back the same exact way. The only difference is your side backs will have a double notch that you should match and pin. Okay, you're going to sew the other seam the same way, and you're going to do the same thing again for your back and your side back. Okay, now that we have our full back and our full front sewn together, we're going to go ahead and stitch them together at the sides. So this is my back, and I'm placing my front, obviously right sides facing, and we're going to be sewing together our right side. Our zipper, invisible zipper, is on the left side. You'll also notice that I went ahead and serged my side seams. That's because we have a side zipper, I want to be able to press both sides of my seams flat. So you might want to go ahead and do that. So we're going to pin together our entire right side seam. Okay, and just like you did earlier, you're going to go ahead and back stitch at the beginning, start at your hem and stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way up. Now that we have our right side seam finished, we're going to leave the left open because we're going to attach our waistband to the skirt, then we'll do the zipper. So we're going to go ahead and stitch our waistbands together. So I'm going to set my skirt aside for just a sec. All right, I'm going to place my front waistband over my back waistband, and I'm going to pin on the left side, my left. Okay, just head over to your sewing machine. You're going to stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then I want you to press the seam open. All right, we're going to go ahead and pin our waistband to our skirt. So with right sides facing, I'm going to first pin at the side seam. And you also have notches on your waistband that should be matching up to the notches on the skirt. So your waistband is going to be flush to the side seam. It does not extend past the side seam. Okay, you can continue pinning the back, again matching your notches. Okay, we're going to head to the sewing machine. We're going to stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. We're going to start on one side and end on the other. Okay, once our waistband is attached, I'm going to go ahead and trim down my seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch, and then I want to press my seam allowance up towards my waistband. All right, we're going to go ahead and attach our zipper. So I gave myself a stitching line where I'm going to be attaching my zipper. It's just a stitch guide. For me, it's 5/8 of an inch from the edge, but also this side seam is slightly on the bias, and so it tends to stretch a bit. And so to avoid, depending on what fabric you're using, any wobbling of your zipper, it's just a good idea. You can also, if you're using something super lightweight, to use some fusible interfacing just where you're gonna be attaching your zipper. So just a quick little note there. The front side is what's facing me. So I'm gonna place my zipper. Also, you guys know this if you watch any of my videos, I use really long zippers because I don't like the zipper pull to be in the way. And then I just adjust. Okay, so my zipper pull is facing down. I'm gonna be stitching on the right side of the zipper tape, my right, and I'm gonna go ahead and pin. I'm taking the zipper to the top because there's a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance at the very top. So I'm just aligning the top of the zipper tape with the top of the waistband. And I'm aligning the zipper teeth right along that stitching line that I gave myself, and I'm gonna pin. I'm just gonna pin maybe once or twice. I really don't need to pin that much because I'm gonna use my guide as I'm stitching, and you'll see that at the sewing machine. Now I gave myself a marking where our zipper is gonna stop. So that's where my last pin will go. Let's head over to the sewing machine and stitch this down. I'm gonna switch to my zipper foot. Okay, so you should be able to see my stitching guide here. That's where I'm just making sure that my zipper teeth are aligned with. And as I stitch, I just open the coil up a little bit. You could also press the coils open a bit before you do this. This is where my zipper is gonna stop, so I'm gonna actually trail off to the side. Okay, now we're gonna work on stitching the other side. This is a really long zipper, you guys. You don't have to use a zipper that's this long. It's just all I had. Okay, so we've attached one side. Before we do the other, we wanna make sure that we mark where that seam line is because we don't want goofy seam lines that don't match, okay? So you're gonna go ahead and close up your zipper. So I wanna make sure that I mark where this seam line is on my zipper tape so that I can match up the other one. So I'm just gonna put a little marking right there. So when you do your zipper like this, normally I sew my entire side seam with a basting stitch, but because I'm doing it slightly different, it can be a little confusing to know that you're placing the other side of your zipper tape correctly because it's sort of a little twisted at the bottom on purpose. So the easiest way to do it is to fold that seam allowance against your stitching line and place it on the zipper. You know that you're matching up. And you're just gonna hold that in place, then open your zipper. Okay, so now that we have it in place, you know exactly how it's gonna go. So your zipper teeth obviously should be facing the skirt, not the raw edge, and you can go ahead and pin. Make sure that that marking that you did is sitting exactly where that seam is, because I don't want it to shift while I'm sewing, because in this instance, we're sewing from the bottom up when we get to the sewing machine. So I'm gonna pin there. Okay, and then you wanna make sure that you also pin where we're starting, right? You have that same marking where we stopped here, is the same place here. And we're gonna start stitching from the bottom, working our way up. Okay, so you see where this pin is? This is where I'm going to be stopping the zipper. But if you remember when we did the other side, I sort of trail off. So you wanna make sure that you start a little below, trailing back into the seam. This will make it easier when we stitch the remaining seam together. Okay, once both sides are attached, we can go ahead and close our zipper. And you should have those seam lines perfectly matching. Now we're gonna go ahead and pin the remaining portion of our side seam. Okay, we're gonna start at the hem. Again, 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're gonna stitch until we meet our existing stitching. Now you'll notice I haven't switched to my regular presser foot. I'm gonna continue using my zipper foot because it's gonna make it easier once we get a little closer to where our zipper is. Okay, now you're gonna stitch up until you get to your existing stitching at the 5/8. Okay, now turn your skirt right side out and press everything nice and flat. Okay, when done correctly, your seam line should be meeting and your zipper should be completely invisible. The method that I did this time around, and the reason I trail off when we get to the end, is because it avoids you getting that little bubble that you sometimes will get when you're trying to match up the seams. So once your zipper is in place, we're gonna go ahead and do our waistband facing. Okay, we're gonna do the same thing we did for our waistband. I'm gonna place my front over my back, right side's facing. I'm gonna pin my left side. You're gonna head to the sewing machine, just like we did with our waistband. You're gonna stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and you're gonna press that seam open. Then, you know, I love a good stitching line. We're gonna go ahead and give ourselves a stitching guide 1/2 inch from the cut edge. Okay, so not 5/8 of an inch, 1/2 inch. All right, guys, I pressed my side seam open. I did my 1/2 inch stitching guideline from one side to the other, and then I went ahead and pressed that 1/2 inch up towards the waistband. So we're gonna go ahead and pin this. I'm going to start by pinning at my side seam first. You're going to want to open out your zipper, and you're going to place the waistband so it's flushed against the other one. Okay, now we're going to head to the sewing machine and we're going to stitch our waistband in place using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so while we're here, we're going to go ahead and close out the side. Okay, let's go ahead and do that on the other side. Okay, now we want to go ahead and trim this seam allowance to about 1/4 of an inch, and then we're going to go ahead and understitch. All right, so as you can see, I trimmed down my seam allowance. I also clipped into my corners, and we're going to go ahead and understitch. You want to make sure that you're stitching 1 on the facing, and 2, that your seam allowance is facing the facing. I'm going to get as close as we can, and you're going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch from the seam. Okay, you're going to turn this right side out. You can pull on your zipper just a bit. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now you're going to go ahead to your ironing table, and I want you to go ahead and press your waistband flat. All right, so now that we have this nicely pressed, our seam allowance of that 1/2 inch that we did is nice and pressed as well. We're going to go ahead and pin so that we can stitch in the ditch. So your waistband facing should be extending beyond your stitching. So what you're going to do is, I like to pin on the right side when I stitch in the ditch. So I like to feel to make sure that that waistband facing is past my stitching line, and you can feel it on the right side of your fabric. And it should, because it is 1/2 inch seam allowance, so it should be a tad longer. And I'm just going to pin all the way around. Okay, let's head over to the sewing machine, and we're going to stitch in the ditch. Okay, you want to make sure that you're stitching right in that seam, which is what we call the ditch. Okay, you're just going to continue until you reach the other end. Okay, once you have stitched in the ditch, you should have caught the underside. If you missed an area, you can slip stitch it closed. Now you should be all finished with that. The last thing for you to do is to finish the hem of your skirt. It's a big ass hem, so it's gonna take you a minute. I went ahead and serged already. You can either do a narrow double fold, which is probably what I'm gonna do, or you can press up the hem allowance and stitch it in place. After you're finished with your hem, you are all done. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that sew along. Make sure and tag me on Instagram at MimiGStyle so I can see all of your amazing makes. Until next time, peace.